Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. We are happy to have product manager Quinnie Chen on the show to talk about the tool Figma. Figma is a collaborative design tool that teams use for wireframes, mockups, and prototypes. But let's learn more about how it helps product managers. So let's hop in. Welcome to the show, Quinnie.
Thank you, Matt. I may do a little bit intro about myself. So I'm Quinnie, and most recently, I have been a product manager for Milkshake app, which is a beautiful, easy, and free website builder that helps you make and update your website in 10 minutes on your phone. I'm also a designer turned product manager, and I always love to explore tools that make people's life easier. And Figma happened to be my favorite product at work.
Oh, that's great. I really like Figma. I've dabbled with it in the past, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. I do want to mention that you might be the first guest we've had from Australia. Correct me if I'm wrong,
wow.
Moshe.
What a privilege.
Yes.
I think you are. I'm trying to remember.
I was trying to remember if you're not, I do apologize, but I think you are.
We are trying to cover all the continents.
Yes.
So
I wanted to point that out. So we might check Australia off the list.
Yeah, and it's really interesting your background because I know other product managers that come from design, and it's such a valuable place to come from as a product manager. I'm always being asked, how do I get to product manager? And people think they need to have an MBA or they need to be software developers. But design is also one of those places where you can come from. So did you start as a designer or you came to design from some other place?
So this is going to be a really interesting history. So I started accounting, but then I got into the bank and got my way into technology team. And that's where I learned about digital. And I went to digital because I went to a lot of hackathons and I was really good with them. So that gave me kind of like the extra experience outside the job. And that put me into NAP Labs, which is an innovation lab in one of the biggest banks in Australia. So that's how I become a proper designer at that time. But I really appreciate my manager at that time gave me a lot of faith thinking about I was able to adapt really quickly using hackathon experience and learn the tools myself to get into the role. And that's how I was actually trained professionally as a designer in those years inside NAP Labs. So, and that's how I discovered my passion is always in an intersection of design and product.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you are a very creative person. I've seen some of your paintings that you paint and some other artwork. And I think some birthday cakes or birthday party stuff. So a very creative person, which I always connected with. I love to connect with. And going back into Figma and what we're talking about today, in the intro kickoff episode that we had, we basically talked about it, that some systems are more designer oriented, some are more product oriented. And Figma, I believe, can be actually both.
Right.
I believe so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So take us a bit about, into it. Where do you see your product manager hat plays a role in Figma versus a designer hat?
Yeah. So just a quick background about Figma, because the core of Figma is a collaboration and a design tool, and it's really focused on collaboration and accessibility. And that's where it's a tool not just for designers, but also bringing adjacent segments like developers and product managers into this tool. And I love that as a product manager, we're looking to how we build our product in an impactful way at scale. And Figma happened to be that unique combination about bring impact at scale. So I've been using Figma quite intensively since 2019. I would say almost daily since then. And I've been using it as a product designer, a freelancer, startup founder, and product manager in different roles over the last couple of years. So it has been really versatile in terms of the role you play while you use the same tool. For designers, I think the mainly thing, it is like a core product for designers. It's focused on the user interface design, but it covers the whole spectrum about like concepting, brainstorming, and also like wireframe, UX design, and UI design fidelity, high fidelity, and prototyping, and also handoff to developers. So it covers whole spectrum about a designer working in this tool. But as a product manager, I use it mostly for collaboration. And I may just bring about the comparison of how I use Figma versus other tools I have explored in the past as a product manager and designer. So in the past, I've been using like POP, which is prototype on paper. Balsamic, which is wireframe tool, UXP, which is also a wireframe and prototype design tool, and Framer, which is a low-code, high-fidelity prototyping tool, and Sketch, which is very similar to Figma as a design tool. But most of them, except for Sketch, are different systems to the final design system, which means you have to hop around different tools, and that reduces both your and your designer's productivity. But for Figma, that's a different game. So before I used Figma, I was actually a Sketch fan, which is a very popular product before, and it was almost like the category leader in that time. But it unfortunately failed to pivot. So in the past, we have this pain point as a designer and product manager that working together with different stakeholders, getting feedback, and updating design is a really complicated process. And as a designer, you'd be like using a bunch of tools like Sketch for design, Envision for prototype, and Zeppelin for design handoff. And as a product manager, getting the license on different tools and getting used to different interface really adds this friction to provide feedback effectively. So another challenge is that in the past, now it changed, but in the past, Sketch was only available on MacBook. So if you're not in this Apple ecosystem, iOS ecosystem, it means that the real-time collaboration door is shut on you in terms of product manager, both with software and hardware constraints. So when Figma came along, because it's a web-based tool, and also it has prototyping and inspect feature embedded into the tool, it actually defeated the combination of Sketch plus Envision plus Zeppelin, and that's how it won the category. And because it's vector-based, the web design tool is very accessible for remote working team. And we see this trend about remote working during a pandemic, and that really takes off. It has this such powerful design system. I will talk a bit more later if we need to explore, but it has like instance interactive components that really allow you to iterate and update design at scale. So that's great for designers because it encourages you to be bold and try more and not worry about, all this work or time spent to creating new iterations.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you mentioned and it's one of the tools UXP that you use.
Yeah.
So I used that also a few years ago before Figma became a big thing. And I chose it actually because of the collaboration features over there that at the time, Envision was one of the leading systems. And they didn't have any collaboration. So what do you see? Why do you think Figma actually won that space over someone like UXP? Because it's very similar system. Both of them are on web based, and both of them has great collaboration options.
Yeah, I guess we talk about the designer ecosystem. Like there's at the beginning, you can grab a template to do wireframe and you turn that into high fidelity prototype and you turn it into final design, but turning that into a handoff documentation to developers and build it, that's a lot of work and pass over between designer and developers. And I don't feel like USP at that point of time has that smooth experience to tie everything together. But in Figma, you have this inspect feature. And then it pretty much as a developer, you hop into Figma file, you hover around the design file, you see, say, the spacing, all the color code, the font size, font type, everything is available for you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you were mentioning the different tools that at one time you had to do you had to have these different tools within your stack, and Figma help consolidate all those tools. Does Figma integrate well with things like Jira, typical like backlog tools, to where you may design something in Figma, but you want to take it to a ticketing system so your development team can work on it? Does it have that functionality?
Definitely. Yeah. So I haven't used Jira for a long time, but I know you can embed Figma file into Jira. I've been using Notion as another
I like Notion
popular tool,
Yeah.
and as a product management tool. And they integrate with Figma as well. So you just sign in your Figma account, and then you can see the design straight away from the tool like Notion page. And the best thing about Figma is that you can actually just copy the link of specific like frame. So say you have 10 screens for design, and then you break down into different stories. And sometimes people just need to see that specific screen. So in the past, if you have other tools, you send a link, it's the whole file that people get lost about. What am I looking at? How does this relate to the story? But if you were able to link specific screens and then navigate easily to that point, then it helps you to just jump into the context straight away.
Mm-hmm.
Another point there, you mentioned Moshe and I talked about the collaboration experience. Is I think from the things I've seen with Figma is the collaboration at scale is pretty massive, and whether that's using Figma or FigJam, but like the ability to get a lot of people on your team within the product and get them up and running very quickly. Maybe that was another with COVID and everyone going to remote work, maybe that was just another advantage they had. They could take the scale of a lot of people using the product, where maybe some other tools had the collaboration aspect, but it wasn't at the same level as a Figma.
Could be,
Yeah. I definitely, as a product manager, I definitely use it extensively for collaboration with my team, including designers and other people, or like running workshops and even doing presentations. So those are like my 3 key use case as a product manager.
Let me ask you this, because what I noticed in the past is that wireframing is a specific skill more towards UX design, and actual design, the high fidelity, is another skill more towards the UI design. And sometimes when you work with a tool that has such a wide range of capabilities, and especially if this is the main tool that the designers are working on, I find working with designers, sometimes they will jump directly into the high fidelity, and they create like as if it's a wireframe, but it will already be with a high fidelity. And then it's kind of sometimes missing the point of creating wireframes. And also the audience, when they look at that, they're thinking like, oh, this already looks great. Is that the final design? So how do you deal with that in those stages of wireframing?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question. Depends on the size of your team and also the stage of your company. Like for example, if a problem is really complicated, and you better, like similar to as a product manager, if a problem is very complicated, we better spend more time in the discovery phase than delivery phase. So for designers, if it's a very complicated problem, we probably want to spend more time on the wireframing, and because wireframe actually is low fidelity, and that means you can make a lot of mistakes and not worry about, removing the elements. While high fidelity design, you will fall in love really easily, and you may have this like conscious or unconscious impression about how to keep something you love. So those are actually just depends on like the problem, how big is the problem, how much time you need to spend on different phase. And the other one is the stage of the company. So for startups, for enterprise, they are on like 2 extreme spectrums. The startups, they need to move fast. Sometimes I don't worry about whether it's high fidelity or wireframe low fidelity. It's about, hey, is your solution aligned with the problem? If it's not, we need to go back to the drawing board and we need to start again. But that process, if we align with that process and that outcome, then the designer will probably think about, whether I should just spend like more time in a low fidelity so I don't waste my time if the design is not going to be final. So I guess it has a little bit mentality discussion to align about where you are, what is the best way to deliver the outcome. And I think the difference between the final design and building the design versus at the beginning as a designer, the needs are very different. So as a designer, your need is trying to iterate fast. The more you can iterate and change, the better. It's not about executing that design function perfectly. That's where the high fidelity and handoff, because developer, for example, their need is trying to execute faster, and they need like already locked in design, and the solution is locked in. It's really hard to change once it's kicking off. So we have to separate these two mentality about what design needs, what developer needs. And as a product manager, of course, we want to bridge this gap between design to build, but we have to understand they are fundamentally very different needs.
Absolutely. And but it's really understanding that, and also knowing where each one is coming from and what they do at each specific stage of their work. So that's, and be mindful also about it, that now we're not about the perfect design, we're more about the wireframing, etc. So tell us a bit more. Our podcast is all audio, so it's hard to explain visually what the system is all about. But tell us a bit about the experience of using Figma, so someone that listened to that who never seen it before might be able to understand a bit what we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. So Figma is actually a very intuitive design interface. And then if you log into Figma, the first thing you see is a bunch of pages, the navigation folders on your left side. And on the main right side, it's a big Canva. And it has a lot of onboarding things. For example, do you want to create a new file of Figma? Do you want to create a new FigJam or import file? So that's actually another interesting feature. As a product manager, I pay attention to these because this is how you bring down the friction of migrating from other design tool into this new design tool. But that's a different discussion about why I love it. As a person who uses Figma, you have a bunch of templates you can explore. And that's one thing I really love about using Figma. And I keep on saying that it has lower learning curve just because it already have a great community building the templates. So even for example, you want to do wireframe as a product manager, trying to express your product thinking while not taking over designer's role. So sometimes having a square or having something, a text, that's sufficient as a wireframe. But other times there's already existing templates on the community file, and you can just go in there, search for it, and grab some very script handwriting style wireframe kit. And then you can use that to kind of mock up the process, your thinking, the flow, and that really facilitates the conversation with designers. But I will only do that kind of wireframing level only if there's a gap in the designer's time and skill set, instead of something that product manager has to do. So I would say that's the difference. Again, tie back into where you are, because sometimes people have more UI design oriented background, and the US probably is a bit lower. It depends on small startups. Sometimes that happens, and you will, as a product manager, you have to bridge the gap and do those kind of things. But for a very mature big company, they will have very specific design roles, wireframe, UX designer, UI designer, service designer, all these kind of things, and then you wouldn't need to do that. So, but I love that the resources there on Figma, and as a product manager, you can just leverage those templates to unleash your creativity.
That's a very powerful thing that I don't think we actually touched on our kickoff episode of things that to expect in those systems. But so I'm really glad that you bring that up, that a system that will have the power of the community that already built things before and create those templates for you. And I'm sure that users can also contribute to those templates for the community, right?
Yeah, definitely. You could even be a developer for the community to build plugins and widgets. That's really powerful.
Yeah, we saw that in the no code series we did. Like some of the no code platforms, they had these kind of templates that you could work off of, and the community was able to build those templates. So that's really cool to see Figma too. I think having templates gives you confidence to use it down the road.
Right. Perfect. Now you mentioned already a few features that you really like. Are there like top 3 features that you love?
Yeah, well, I think I actually tie the features into the use case as a product manager. So I may like talk about them together. So the first biggest use case is about review, design, and align a solution with problem with the designers. So that's one of my biggest use case. And something I have to mention about is just the way the Figma is built. So I don't know whether it's counted a feature, but basically it's the differentiator of the product. So Figma is built on WebGL graphic library, and it allows you to have like really interactive, high fidelity 3D or 2D graphic on any browser without any plugin. And that's its unique value proposition. And that means you can do really smooth online collaboration experience together with other people remotely. That's why I love it. So that's like one big feature, but also like the biggest differentiator of Figma. And then I like back then, I remember one of the biggest pain point as working with designer as a product manager was trying to make sure I was reviewing the right version of the design.
Yes.
And I was using Figma in the past a few years ago. And the problem was that, Sketch was a MacBook-based product, and the file was kept as a local copy. So to work effectively, I have to like meeting in person almost become a mandatory requirement.
Yeah.
And even though I really pride myself as a very collaborative and democratic product manager, I still can't help to notice the power dynamic when one is giving the feedback on the spot about things as a product manager, and the other one is trying to make changes or taking notes as a designer. So when it comes to collaboration online, I think Figma solved that collaboration problem really well, because it kind of put both parties as equals by giving people space and time to provide feedback. And especially when it comes to real-time updates, it just changed the game from single player to multiplayer. So that's like one biggest feature or differentiator of Figma and why I love it. And my favorite way of working with my team, maybe also like tie into the feature question, is about the huddle and co-design with my designer. So similar to Slack huddle or something, you could just like have voice calls, and then you would jump on the same file, you can co-design together. I think in that use case, you really need to build relationship with designer for them to trust you to do that instead of like taking over their process. So I was like very collaborative and willing to learn from the designer. And that's how I can fit into their workflow. And that's another advantage. If I use Figma, I'm naturally be part of their workflow. And that's the case that they also happen like just know that I appreciate their craft, I appreciate their work, and they invite me to actual like brainstorm sessions and social media post ideation session. That was really fun. So again, the first feature I really love about Figma is the online collaboration. And the second one is actually, I love to use FigJam, which actually is a secondary product of Figma. I use that to run workshops. So again, leveraging the templates we talk about from the community, I was able to really quickly put together some workshop preparation, ice-breaking activities, all those things. And I basically run my vision strategy workshop with the whole team across functions like product, design, engineer, customer support, and marketing, all in FigJam. And the onboarding process is really low. Like people just get on. I don't need to explain too much about the tool, and we just know how to use it. And it's really fun. But the reason I choose FigJam over Mira is because I was able to move the FigJam sticky notes directly to Figma, so I can carry on with the work.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I used the FigJam, and I was able to take stuff over to Figma, because you risk losing. I was afraid of losing things that I was doing in FigJam if I ported it over to Figma, but that's a great feature to be able to move it on over. So
that's a very good point. Yeah, and probably interesting move when they started FigJam. I think it was launched last year or something like that. So it's recently a newer product. It seems like it got a big hold already.
Yeah. And Lucidchart
Yeah.
actually does that. They implemented Lucid Spark, and I think they may have taken that kind of idea from FigJam, where you can take Lucid Spark whiteboarding over to Lucidchart, which is what I'm using today.
Yeah. The only difference is that Lucidchart is not a design system; it's charting system. So it's a bit different perspective where they're coming from. But and they also, you can do wireframing over there, so that's where it's really interesting for product managers. We always ask our guests what they don't like and they would like to improve in the system.
Yeah. Sure. So I feel like I'm going to be nitpicking to say, because I really love using Figma, but I could say that I can do better to simplify the basic and often used animation effects. So I actually built presentation on Figma. So I know that's a very rare use case as a product manager, but I don't use Google Slides or other things. I actually built my presentation there. But I have to build those transition myself. So not every PM is willing to spend time to do that. And this could limit their use case to adjacent segments. So I think that's something they can improve. The other thing is that there's just too many choices in terms of plugins. And when there are too many choices, your decision making actually slows down. So that's another thing maybe they can work on to like really find things you need. And the last one is probably trying to manage the plugin subscription I have on Figma. So I got this surprise bill for a plugin renewal that I totally forgot, and I couldn't figure out how to cancel it. So I guess those are three things I would say, hey, they could work on for product manager. But of course, their main user is designer, so they may actually have other things to improve on first.
And that's also one of my worries sometimes, is that when you work with the design system, sometimes they're so sophisticated and full with features that for product managers is overwhelming. There are too many things going on over there. And I think Figma actually has done a great job simplifying things, but you're saying there might be even more ways to simplify things if the persona is a product manager.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, so one tip I would give product manager who try to use Figma to start with is, once you become a collaborator in Figma, what you could do is just following the designers along the way and conversation wise. So you can go to their profile, you can use your profile photo, you tap on their profile, you can see where they are. Literally, you'll be on the same page.
Yeah, you follow,
and that's how you kind of like learn the craft from people who are experienced.
Okay, yeah. So to your point that you say about following the designer and learning from them, the first time that I worked with designers and they show me this feature and they told me, yeah, just follow us. And I'm like, where do you want to follow me to follow you exactly? I didn't understand what they were talking about. So they tell, no, just click on our avatar in the top over there. And I clicked on it, and all of a sudden I saw where they're talking and what they're doing exactly, which was really cool, because we didn't even have to share our screens. We were on a Zoom meeting, but instead of sharing our screen, each one of us was on the same board, and we were all working together on that board. So it was actually pretty nice. And since then, I've seen Miro also implemented the same feature, that you click on the avatar of the person presenting and you can follow them.
That's nice. I was thinking about when I used Figma in the past, I know when I use Miro and when I use Figma, when you would come back to a Miro board, it would show you like, hey, these are the changes that have occurred since you left. And I don't recall Figma having that. Figma had a version history, but it didn't seem as though they had kind of like, hey, let's catch you up on what happened.
Yeah, no, I don't think they have that feature. But I guess it's kind of really good to think about how they mirror the real life collaboration into your online experience, and probably like telling you something has changed is usually being made by like commenting or other things. Like depends on the permission you have. I think Miro, it's because everyone have almost the same level of access if you want to collaborate. While in Figma, you have viewer, permission, commenter, collaborator, and editor, and admin. So there are different levels of controls. And I think that's why they don't need to necessarily mitigate that with like telling you what has been changed, because I feel like that would be too much and kind of becoming a noise for designers, because anything interface design changing in text or something, it just becoming too much.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good point. Yeah, that would get into the myopic kind of design changes, and you might not necessarily want to see everything, every little detail.
Yeah.
Yep, very nice. If Figma was to listen, is there anything that you would like to see in future releases?
Well, I feel like they are doing so well. Like they just started doing the internalization as well, like a localization. So I know they are releasing a feature soon about like local Japanese version of Figma, which is great. And then if they expand to other languages, if you have like embedded like local language, they'll be really crazy good, because the way you design things about display lateral, like left to right, right to left, and then the side of things, it's all different for different local languages.
Wow.
And that's an amazing feature they are going to release. I think that we start with Japanese. The other one is I heard is in beta. I'm looking forward to it. It's prototype screen reader. So it's relatively new feature and I haven't used it. But from what I learned, it allows you to test your prototype in accessibility mode. And that will basically, it will read out the labels. So in the past, when we design experience, accessibility on the design tool, usually we focus on like color, space, font size, and language. But what developer build in mobile app, for example, like making a label accessible to vision impaired user, it is really hard to simulate in design, and you don't know how that will turn out into a tool. But with this function, I believe we actually educate people to be more inclusive in design. So I'm looking forward to this feature. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's really nice. And then one last question we always ask is, how is their customer success? Have you had to deal with them when it comes to implementation of Figma? Any sort of things that you've had to talk to them about in your past?
Well, I think the product was building so well that I never actually need to contact the customer support.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess that may be a different case when you are enterprise users, which is great. They also have that option for you to keep in touch with them.
Excellent to hear. Well, very good. Moshe, do you have any other questions?
No, I think we covered everything. This was a really interesting discussion. I also am a fan of Figma, although I'm using some other products as well. But I've seen also how these type of products evolved over the years. And to me, from product perspective, it's really all about the collaboration.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, I think Figma by itself is a great case study, even for product managers to understand how they build this product.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, very good. Quinnie, thank you so much for joining us, and you enjoy the rest of your day in Australia. Thank you again as we wrap up our day here on the East Coast of North America.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, so, it is tomorrow for you, right?
Yes, it is. Yes.
I'm in the future.
You are in the future. Hopefully, hopefully our futures are all bright for me and Moshe. So yes. Let us know how we turn out.
Yeah.
So awesome. Again, thank you so much. Great conversation, and look forward to talking to you again down the road sometime.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right,
thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.